Alright, so we're going to take a look at this assignment here. The easy level option is to choose one of the four graphs and explain why it doesn't belong in the group of four graphs. The medium level says to do the exact same thing, but instead to provide two reasons why one of these graphs doesn't belong. Finally, the challenge level asks that for each of the four graphs, try and find at least one reason why it doesn't belong. This challenge level gives us a hint for answering the first two levels if we choose to. The fact that we can answer the question by finding reasons why any of the graphs don't belong suggests that there are things that are different about each graph and that there is no one right answer. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at each graph individually and we're going to see how you could have answered using information from any of these graphs. So let's start by taking a look at graph 1. Graph 1 has an x-axis that goes from 0 to 10, skip counting by 5s, and a y-axis that goes from 0 to 10, skip counting by 5s. It is the only graph that ascends and then descends in terms of data. So it's the only one that increases and then decreases at the end. That's one thing that makes it not belong. The other is that it is the only graph that starts at 5 on the y-axis. These two things make it not belong. If we look at graph 2, it's the only graph that starts at 3 on the y-axis. It's also the only graph that has data only until the 5 on the x-axis. It doesn't finish collecting data across the entire graph. These two things make it not belong. Graph 3. Graph 3 has a whole bunch of things that can make it not belong. It's the only one to start at 6 on the y-axis. Its x-axis skip counts by 5, but all the way to 15. It's the only graph that has descending points across it, and it's also the only graph that goes into negative numbers. Finally, graph 4, while looking similar to graph 2, is the only graph that has data that starts at 0, 0 on the x and y axis. It has ascending data that goes all the way to 10, and this data is collected across in double the length of data points of graph 2, whereas graph 2 collected the same amount of data but in a much shorter either period of time or length of distance, whatever the x-axis was measuring. And so you can see that any of these graphs, in fact, may not belong. And if we look hard enough, we can find multiple reasons, either the ones I listed or other reasons, why any of these graphs may not belong. If you find this assignment challenging and you want to talk to me about it more, please feel free to email me.